Good afternoon or morning, depending upon where you are, and welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, Innovating in Uncertain Times, How to Launch New Products Faster and More Profitably, sponsored by TechLink. My name is Jill Jesko. I'm Executive Editor of Industry Week. And before we begin, I'd like to explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you are having audio difficulties or your slides are not advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you're running pop-up blocking software, you will need to disable that to view the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, we ask that you please press the ?help button in the upper right corner to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the maximize icon in the upper right corner to enlarge the window. Also, be sure to check out the resources tab on your console to download a PDF of the presentation and to access other materials provided by TechLink. We welcome and in fact encourage your questions during today's event. To submit your questions, simply type your question into the Ask a Question window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We will be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that follows the main presentation. But please feel free, and again, in fact, we encourage you to send your questions at any time as they occur to you, and we will add them to the queue. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on the Industry Week website within the next day for you to review. You will be notified by email when that archive is available. When the webinar ends, please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen. We will appreciate your help there. And with that, let me take a moment and introduce today's speakers. Joining us today are John Brandt, CEO of the MPI Group, an experienced executive, entrepreneur, journalist, author, and researcher. John Brandt is the founder and CEO of MPI Group and the former editor-in-chief of both Chief Executive and Industry Week magazines. His most recent book, Nincompoopery: Why Your Customers Hate You and How to Fix It, is based on groundbreaking MPI research into innovation, leadership, and performance excellence across more than 50,000 organizations. Joining John today is Austin Leach, Associate Director of TechLink. Austin has advised private sector clients and federal agencies on building rewarding partnerships that convert federal R&D into promising commercial opportunities for U.S. industry. For nearly a decade, his work has spurred innovation and growth for small businesses. As a foremost leader in federal technology transfer, Austin has delivered numerous presentations to audiences nationwide, and he's the recipient of several awards of excellence from the Federal Laboratory Consortium. Prior to joining TechLink, Austin worked in medical device R&D at Abbott Laboratories. He has a doctorate in materials science and engineering from Georgia Tech, and is a named inventor on 4 U.S. patents. For further information about both of our speakers, please check out the Speaker Details tab on your console. With that, welcome, gentlemen. And Austin, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. We're glad to be here today, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. TechLink initiated this study because for nearly 30 years, we've helped companies spur innovation and growth by partnering with federal labs. We increasingly see companies pushing to develop new products and services with tighter budgets and tighter timelines. So we wanted to hear from industry exactly how they're approaching R&D today. So I'm looking forward to shedding light on how you as innovators can take action on the findings from the study to optimize your own efforts. I know everyone's really excited to get into the findings, but I thought it would help if we first went into the top line themes of the study. Those are first that most companies actually lack a holistic innovation strategy, which is interesting, but yet the companies are committing significant resources and personnel to R&D, increasing overhead and affecting revenue. The second theme is that companies often overlook effective paths to fuel ideation in the R&D process. Many companies are actually missing chances to move faster and save money. The third point is that companies are often missing opportunities to build what we call innovation allies. There are significant untapped opportunities in both university and federal laboratories that can support your R&D needs. And the last point is that enterprises specifically tend to struggle to efficiently turn their ideas into action, thereby slowing down their pathway to market. We'll wrap up today's presentation by giving everyone an opportunity to actually benchmark your own innovation practices against the study data. But for now, I'll turn it over to you, John.
Thanks, Austin. Hey, everybody. John Brandt, CEO of the MPI Group. Delighted to be here. This is a really important study. TechLink wanted to do this study to really figure out what is going on with innovation across the country and to provide some benchmarks. Austin mentioned there's a benchmarking opportunity later on. And it's really interesting because as we talk to executives in the work that we do at the MPI Group across industries, everybody loves innovation. Everybody loves new product development. And then when you start to dig down into some of what you would consider to be best practices, you see that maybe they are not going about it in the best way possible. And you also see that there's some results that maybe could be improved there. So that was the idea behind the study. Very exciting results. Happy to share them with you. We got responses from 152 different companies. You can take a look. I'm not going to read the slide to you here, but we have about half privately owned. We had 24% private equity. We had senior executives answering this. Majority of companies had revenues over 20 million. And we looked across a variety of industries. Most of the highest number of participants came from software, but we also had machinery, materials, electronics, metals involved here. People where innovation is really, really important. And we wanted to find out what was happening with that. So I'm going to go in sort of three different sections today. I'm going to talk about the innovation foundation, like what are the things that you're doing to try to do that? Then we're going to move into innovation characteristics, sort of what types of innovation are people doing? How is that working for them? And then we're going to get into practices and performances. And that is an area that has got some really interesting data that I haven't really seen out there before. So let's get right into it. What we're finding is that we've got companies, they're putting their money where their mouths are. They believe that innovation is important. They're putting an enormous amount of effort and budgets into R&D. We've got a third of companies told us that 10% or more of their employees are involved in innovation. And again, I'm not going to read everything on this chart because everyone will want to shoot themselves if I do that, because you can get this presentation afterward and you can see that there. But lots of people are putting less than that. We also have more than a third who are investing 10% or more of all their revenues in innovation. So you've got a significant group that is putting a lot of effort into this. So that begs the question then, where is that effort going? And what we see is that design, when you look at the highest average of R&D time, it mostly goes to design. This 21% goes to design. When you look at the broader picture, and I'm waving my hands because you're looking across the chart there. When you see nearly half of time in R&D goes toward investments and everything, goes toward the first three stages: ideation, design, and tooling. And we're going to look later on about the fact that there's maybe some ways to do that a little bit better than companies are doing now. So, and we also find that for most companies, the majority of their innovation happens in one or two labs or one or two centers for innovation. Now, this gets to the first point that Austin made early on. Everybody says innovation is important. Lots of people are putting lots of time, effort, and money into it. And yet, when you say, okay, how are you doing this? Do you have a holistic view? Are you looking at this across your company? You've got very few companies that have deployed R&D strategies across all of their departments. You've got only under 25%, 24% have innovation strategies and goals deployed that address every company department. And this is significantly one of the best practices we see at people who are outperforming. Are you involving everybody, every department in the company in innovation? And this is even worse to me, and I can just say that. Austin's very polite, I'll just say it. You got 1 in 5 companies that don't have an innovation strategy at all. And if you're in an industry where innovation is key, I don't know how you want to survive 5, 10, 20 years from now if you don't have an innovation strategy. We then ask about various technical competencies for various stages of innovation. And we had only a third say, yeah, we're excellent in that. Everybody else reported, we had about a quarter who reported fair, poor, or no technical competencies. One of the interesting things we found is we wanted to find out, now, are people doing this innovation? Is it all in-house? Is it hybrid? Are they outsourcing it? And we found that most R&D processes are performed primarily or partially in-house. And then we asked the follow-up question to that, of course, is, well, if you do collaborate, if you do some outside, or if you're partnering with people, who are you partnering with? Who do you collaborate with? And what we found is that companies are most likely to partner with their customers and their suppliers. And yet, even that, only 48%, under half of companies are actually collaborating with customers. And we've got far fewer who are collaborating with people who are developing technologies, whether it's colleges or universities or government labs, as Austin will talk about a little bit later. One of the things we like to do in studies that we perform is ask if people are leaders, or if they're in catch-up mode, or if they're adequate, or if they're a competitor, or if they have no innovation whatsoever. And what that does is generally we can then take a look at, because what we find in these anonymous surveys is people are generally pretty honest about it. And we check the data too. We're like Groucho Marx, who said, trust everyone but cut the cards. But what we find is that then that leader designation is sort of a proxy for overall good performance, and allows us to then look at best practices that leaders do. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. What we found, though, is that about 36%, with these innovation leaders, you got that third. These leaders, they do things differently. You've got 36% have an innovation strategy and goals that is deployed across all corporate departments. Only 18% of everybody else does that. You've got over half rate their technology development technical competencies as excellent. That is twice the rate of other companies. And you've got 66%, 2/3, who say that they frequently collaborate with their customers, versus less than 40% of everybody else. So it's really striking when you can get these leaders and say, okay, it's because when we're benchmarking, you're going to benchmark at the end of this presentation, or Allison's going to tell you how to go do it. The worst thing you can do is find out, oh, we're good or terrible, and then go on. What you're trying to do is figure out, okay, here's where we are, and what would the ladder be if we wanted to get better going forward? And these innovation leaders offer some suggestions on where you might want to go with that. At this point, I want to turn it back over to Austin, because I know, Austin, you and TechLink work with companies of every size. What would you say about the state of the innovation foundation at some of these companies, or what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think, before I dive into those examples, one of the most interesting things from this study, you actually mentioned it earlier, is that companies are investing immense resources into some of the earliest stages of innovation, right? The ideation, the design, the tooling. So this is when companies, really the main objective might be to fail fast, or maybe build an entirely new capability altogether, kind of from the ground up. However, the risk associated with innovating from scratch really holds companies back a lot of times from innovating at all, right? So companies that we actually work with and support, they minimize this risk of ideating and innovating from scratch by tapping into technologies invented in federal labs. And specifically for us, that's the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs laboratories. The inventions from these labs actually can solve companies' current problems, or maybe align with future interests. And these inventions can be accessed through licensing and collaboration with the lab to actually bring the technology to market. So back to your original question, we have helped companies of all sizes access opportunities to meet their specific innovation goals. The first example I'd like to share is we help the company, or the world's, effectively the world's largest coating companies, meet shifting regulatory requirements by accessing safer anti-corrosion coatings developed by the US Navy. These environmentally safe solutions are now widely used both commercially and by the US military. The second example is a much smaller company example. We helped an early phase startup secure a license as well as an R&D collaboration with a defense laboratory to bring new, safer battery chemistries to market for the high energy density battery market. So think replacements for lithium ion battery chemistries. This company has now advanced the technology. They've brought in a first round of funding, and they're well on their way towards scaling up this invention. It really started in those early phases with the idea in a lab that was cultivated and developed to a point where this particular startup accessed the technology with our assistance. So these are, two basic examples that showcase how companies can plug into this opportunity of federally funded research and development to fuel their own product development priorities. There's thousands of opportunities like this across pretty much any technology discipline that you might be looking into. Back to you, John.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we talked a little bit about innovation foundation. What we want to talk about is it's wonderful to talk about innovation. Oh, innovation's important. We're putting this much money into it. It's really important that we get a little more granular and talk a little bit about what are the characteristics of that innovation. Are there types of innovation that are more or less successful, that are harder or less hard to do? And so what we wanted to dive in is go a little bit deeper on that, because to really give everybody on this webinar and other people who are going to use the data here some opportunities to improve, it's important to know, again, what are you trying to do? Where are you going? What types of innovation should you focus on? So one of the things we asked was, what type of innovation is this? Is it routine? Is it going to change the world? And not surprisingly, this is a common thing, about 40% of innovations for companies in the last 3 years were routine. These are things that leverage your existing technologies, your existing competencies, existing customers. We found that new products and services that can provide greater competitive advantages or can break open a market are about half as likely to be released. Again, not surprising, but all of us, of course, are looking for that thing that is going to change the market and really differentiate us from our competitors. We found that a majority of companies are able to develop their products and services, a new product or a new service, get it developed, get it out in less than a year. Then that's terrific. But 7 to 12 month window. We also found that a third of companies, however, it takes them more than a year to do that. And that obviously is going to be a problem, because if you're an industry and if you have competitors who are getting something out in 7 to 12 months and you're doing it in more than 12 months, being number two is never a great place to be with a new technology or a new product. We ask, and again, I'm not going to go through this whole chart. You should just download the presentation, take a look at it. We ask what types of technologies are most frequently used in new products. IT hardware and software, not surprisingly, given the changes we've seen with Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, are the two most commonly used. But we've got lots of other ones there, and I encourage you to take a deep look at that. Another thing we wanted to look at is, are people developing technologies on their own or buying them from someone else? Or are they using licenses or cooperative research and development agreements, also known as CRADAs, to find this technology? And what you can see is when you look at most companies, only about a quarter of companies are using licensing for about even a quarter of what they're doing. Only a quarter of companies are using it for about 10% of their products. This is where it's really useful, again, to go back to the innovation leaders. So we say, okay, if for 10% or less, what are the innovation leaders doing? You've got 40% of them are using CRADAs for more than 10%. I meant more than 10% for the others as well, versus just 18% of everyone else. Then when you look at 67% of their product and service launches, 2/3 of their service launches are disruptive. They're not routine. They are changing the market. They are changing their competitive position. versus just 57% at other companies. Austin, I'm guessing we have some people in the audience who don't exactly know what a CRADA is, and maybe you could talk a little bit about a CRADA or the licensing, or how people can access this and what it costs.
Absolutely. So the federal government and the DoD and VA specifically, for the purpose of this discussion, are conducting research and development with specific needs for either the military or for our veterans in mind. Here's an example of a health monitoring and documentation software that's been licensed multiple times for everything from remote patient monitoring to telemedicine or mobile health for veterinary healthcare, and even remote non-physiological monitoring of machines and structures. Okay, so you can see things invented maybe with a specific purpose in mind, but being taken advantage of for commercial applications. So licensing these inventions, or as John mentioned, cooperative research and development, or CRADAs, are two ways that companies can actually advance their own product development interests by partnering with the federal government. This is actually called technology transfer. In fact, it's legislatively mandated that all federal laboratories engage U.S. industry in the commercialization of their inventions to drive economic growth. And so that relies on the private sector to actually take these inventions and bring them to market. What we learned in this study is that most companies aren't actually tapping into these amazing innovation opportunities developed within the federal laboratory space. Whether that's because they're simply not aware, or maybe they believe that the best ideas actually come from their own internal teams, we actually make exploring what's possible within reach. The process really starts with companies being able to identify an opportunity that aligns with their own R&D goals. We make this super easy by serving up all DoD and VA licensing and partnership opportunities through technology transfer in an online, easy to search marketplace. You'll find those on our website. Now that you know where to actually start finding the technologies, let's talk a little bit about the process of licensing. So we'll talk about how to license the technologies, and then we'll talk about the opportunities for CRADA partnerships, or that cooperative research and development. Once you've identified an opportunity, that's where our team of certified licensing professionals is ready to step in and provide no-cost assistance for further evaluation of the technology, to help you move forward with the actual licensing process. That would include negotiating terms, of course, applying for the license, and then eventually you would receive a fully executed license agreement that sets you on your way to start commercializing the technology. You may think that engaging with the federal government involves dealing with a lot of bureaucracy and long timelines. That's where we step in to really help the process move very efficiently and quickly. We've helped companies secure licenses within 3 weeks, actually, of inquiring about the opportunity. So that's pretty significant when you're talking about engaging with an agency the size of the Department of Defense. One of the most valuable things our team actually provides companies during the evaluation process is direct access to the invention teams behind the research and development. We can arrange for facilitated discussions so that you can do your due diligence as a company to move forward with the opportunity. We can arrange for transfers of materials and prototypes, visits to the laboratories if necessary, anything that you need to help build your business case to move forward with the licensing opportunity. Once you have made that decision to move forward, we will help you with your application package, developing a commercialization plan, which talks about how you would bring the particular technology to market. We'll provide guidance on the financial aspects and the legal terms of the agreement. And remember, TechLink is actually a nonprofit funded by the government to fulfill this function. So there's no charge for our services. We really are in this to help build win-win agreements, fair and reasonable terms for companies, Our main objective is to see this taxpayer-funded research and development make it into the hands of a capable partner who can then introduce new products and services that help support our nation's economy, deliver new products and technologies to our warfighters and to our veterans. If you jump into or think about partnering, maybe not on licensing, but through cooperative research and development, our team is also ready to support you as you engage with the DoD and VA in that capacity. CRADAs enable two-way true collaboration back and forth between a company and the laboratory. They're governed by a specific statement of work that says you as the company will do X, Y, and Z. The laboratory will fulfill their responsibility, and your main goal together is to advance the technology towards a product or service offering. The CRADA itself allows for the exchange of ideas, for materials, the sharing of equipment and capabilities. They also contain special intellectual property provisions that gives benefits to the collaborators, such as a first right to an exclusive license of any invention that may arise through that collaboration. CRADAs can also stand by themselves, not be connected to a license agreement, but sort of be like a stepping stone to get you to the decision that you need to make to actually move forward with a license. So if you want to evaluate a really early phase technology in partnership with the lab, we can help put a CRADA in place to help you explore what maybe the commercial offering may be for that particular technology. We can help you negotiate the terms of the CRADA, the statement of work, help you understand the intellectual property considerations that come along with the CRADA, and several other aspects as you work to enter into a partnership with DoD or VA in that capacity. So both license agreements and CRADAs are excellent tools to inject new life into your innovation efforts, to kind of get past that ideate or innovating from scratch concept, to really start with a formed out idea that you can take and run with. The innovation pathways offered by CRADAs and licensing may be exactly what your company needs to inject new life into your innovation efforts and maybe kind of move away from that incremental innovation of existing products towards more revolutionary or disruptive ideas. Back to you, John.
Great. Thanks, Austin. So we've talked about the foundation for innovation. How do you set yourself up for success on that? We've talked about the characteristics of innovation, maybe some ways to look at that. Now we're going to talk about actual practices and performances. One of the things everybody talks in this study and when we're interviewing people, when you talk to people, you talk about the fact that getting new ideas, the ideation, how do you come up with ideas for a new product or a new architecture, a new technology, a new way to service customers? It's the most important part of the process. And yet, when you look at what you would consider to be ideation best practices, and there's a whole bunch of them here, I'm not going to read them to you again. There's only one that's used by over half of all companies in this study, and that was brainstorming. And brainstorming is great, but there are lots of other best practices that people might want to be looking at right now. And so I encourage you, again, take a deep look at this. I don't have time to go into every one of these best practices right now. We asked then, where are you most likely to get the spark for innovation? You know, when you're doing this ideation, you're trying to come up with this, where is that going to come from for you? And it's most likely to come from customers. If you look down the list, though, you've got a declining thing there, and you see that you've got lots of other opportunities here that people aren't tapping, whether it's colleges or universities or non-R&D employees. And I really encourage people to go talk to people. And if you've got customer service reps or sales reps, ask them what their customers are complaining about. I mean, that's one of the best ways to find a new thing. Or ask, one of the questions that we always encourage people we work with to ask is to go to your customers and say, in what industry are you getting a great service or a great new product that you wish you could get from our industry? Because the truth of the matter is, a great innovation often it's probably not the first time it was ever thought of on the planet. Sometimes it is. Austin can tell you about those. But most of the time, it's going to be somebody saying, that's a really good idea. We should do it over here. And we don't see people doing that in the way that they might. We ask approximately what percentage of your ideas that you come up with for new products or services actually turn into a budgeted project, because that's really the gold standard of, are you serious about it? Did you put money behind it? And we've got half of companies say that 25% or fewer of their ideas are turned into budgeted products. And that's just dismaying. And that's either, it's either they don't have good innovation processes or they're not coming up with great ideas. Something's wrong there. You would like to see that percentage to be significantly higher. Again, we look at many product development practices. Once you're past the ideation phase and you're actually developing the product, we see tons and tons of best practices that are not being used by companies out there. In fact, when you look at one of the most common ones, knowledge management and reuse. Hey, we developed this technology. Hey, we figured this out. Maybe we can take this to other products or other markets or other products in our line. It's only extensively used by 41% of all companies out there. And again, I'm not going to read this list, but when you look at this, it is somewhat inexplicable that most companies aren't using these more often. And we also found, and this correlates with one of the findings earlier, where people are doing development in-house, we've got a majority of companies are outsourcing a fifth or less of their development. And on the one hand, that's terrific because they have confidence in their abilities, except if you remember earlier, we had a lot of companies, huge number of companies saying that they didn't believe they had the technical competencies to do product development. If you don't have the technical competency, you either have to build it, buy it, or outsource it. And to see companies that are telling us that they don't have the capabilities to do it, but they're doggedly going to keep doing it themselves, it's like me standing on the range at the golf course saying, I don't know anything about this game, but I'm going to get better just by standing here and sweating in the sun. It just doesn't work. And then the other thing we found is we got a lot of companies are not getting enough from their R&D projects. We ask approximately what percentage of new product and service development projects result in sales to customers. And you've got huge numbers are telling us less than 10%, less than 20%. What you'd really like to see is that percentage being much higher. And then we also say, what percentage of product and service development projects achieve their sales targets? And it gets even lower there. You'd really like to see both of those numbers in the 25 to 30% range in terms of a benchmark going forward. And the fact that we've got, close to 20% of a huge number of companies not doing that tells me that they don't have the right practices in place or something is not happening there and that something needs to be done. This is also worrisome. We ask, what percentage of your new product and service development projects, when you have a new idea or you develop a new technology, how many times do you take that? What percentage of those do you say, hey, this is great, we're going to leverage this in another area? And we've got almost half of companies who leverage 25% or less of their projects for future ideas and competencies. So on the one hand, it's great to have these new products or these new competencies, but that's the most expensive way to do it if you're developing it for a single market or a single product instead of thinking, okay, what can we build into the architecture of our company? What can we build into the architecture of our product line to make sure that going forward we can do a better job with this and to frankly lower the cost of R&D, even if you spend more because you're getting more sales out of it. You're getting more products going forward. And then, a couple of the real money questions here. Approximately what percentage of annual sales are derived from new products and services introduced in the last 12 months? And again, you've got tons of innovation efforts that are failing. You've got, just take a look at it. You've got huge numbers of companies that are not even hitting 11 to 15%. We'd like to see 25, 30% there, because you want to have that innovation pipeline moving. And then we ask, what was the company's approximate net profit margin in the last year? And again, you can look at that. You've got lots of companies who are, having difficulty there in terms of generating profit margins. Part of the reason for that is that one of the reasons innovation is so important is not just important to have new products and keep customers satisfied, is that you are generally going to, early on and once a product gets live, you're going to be able to have better margins for that new product than you are for legacy products. And so you need to have that product life cycle going there and constantly feeding that. We also found, and I think we believe this is related to innovation and maybe innovation difficulties, what's your customer retention rate? And what you can see is you've got large percentages of companies that are having difficulty with this. You've got a huge number of companies that have a customer retention rate of 70% or less. It's really expensive to find new customers. It can be 5, 10 times as expensive to get a new customer as it is to keep one in there. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is great service. Another way is to keep a steady stream of products that keep them really wanting to do business with you. And then we ask what percentage of customers are new to the company compared to 3 years ago. So that begs the question, okay, if we got lots of people who are having difficulties, how are the innovation leaders doing? And what we found is that, as we suspected, the ones who are leading, the ones who are sort of better across the board in their performances, are doing things differently. And they're different. They're more likely to use ideation best practices. One example, 60% of them extensively analyze product data versus just 39% of everybody else. They're more likely to use development best practices. For example, 44% use lean development versus 28% of everybody else. You've got 52% of them who report that half of their projects that they do for R&D result in sales. That's a quarter of other companies. That's more than twice as much. You've got 56% of them report that at least half of their projects or more achieve their target sales, which is terrific. You've only got a little over a third of other companies doing that. You've got 40% reporting that half of projects or more result in new ideas or technical competencies versus just 17%. That's that key that we were talking about a minute ago, is that it's great to have innovation. It's really even better if you've got a holistic view of it, you've got everybody working on it, and you are trying to develop new platforms, new architectures for a whole series of new products, and it becomes much less expensive on a per product basis. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Austin. And Austin, what are you seeing out there with the companies you work with, or maybe the companies you don't work with?
Well, John, companies who have received our assistance at TechLink we know this from a study we've conducted, have successfully contributed nearly $10 billion in national economic impact. And that's all originating with agreements between these companies and DoD and VA laboratories. These companies have raised over $550 million in investment capital based on the agreements that they have with these labs, as well as generated billions in sales to the private sector and sales back to the U.S. military and to our veterans. License agreements and CRADAs have helped many of our clients break free from what we would call innovation deadlock, providing really de-risked technology that's ready to go. Oftentimes, these technologies carry companies much past that initial stage of R&D where we're talking about the resource expenses being so high, past that point, and even in some cases over the proverbial valley of death, very close to launching products and selling them, potentially back to the military and veterans and the private sector. The companies that we work with that move forward on these opportunities, they really have a running start in the innovation race, and many are actually near the finish line of that race before they even start. So a huge opportunity to really jumpstart your innovation practices by tapping into what's available in these federal labs. And again, the breadth of technology solutions that exist just in the database on our own website is immense. Our team is there to help you at no cost. So it's a really huge win for companies to tap into support that we might provide. With that, we've reached actually the end of our webinar here. I'd like to first thank you all for participating, but I'd like to really invite you to benchmark your own company's innovation practices and performances versus the results from this study. If you look in the resource center of the webinar, and Jill described where you can access that, you'll see a link to this benchmarking tool. You'll also see a link to a microsite that contains a lot of information on this study and more information on how to access TechLink services. We'll also connect with you after the event via email to provide some of this useful information for you. And with that, I just want to again thank you for joining us. We're going to move now to question and answers, which John and I are happy to take your questions. And I'll hand it over to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. A few of our audience members have already submitted questions, so we will get to those momentarily. If you have a question and you have not submitted it yet, do it now. We want to address as many of those questions as we can. I also want to remind you now, once the webinar is over and the Q&A and blah, 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 when the feedback form appears on the screen, please take a moment and fill that out. That also helps us tremendously. And I do just want to mention that I had no idea that Veterans Affairs even had a lab. That was news to me.
Right.
That doesn't naturally occur to me, I guess. Okay, so if you two are ready for questions, we have plenty of them here. Okay, first question is, if a technology has completed an SIBR project and is ready for dual use, would the CRADA approach be applicable as a next step?
I'm going to say that's Austin's to answer.
Sure. Happy to answer. That's a great question. We often see CRADAs being or executed kind of in parallel with SBIR activity. So if you see, or if you're active, if you have an SBIR award, or if you're actively pursuing one, then certainly partnering with a defense laboratory that's aligned to that particular technology area is a benefit to you as a company to tap into those resources that are available through the defense labs, and also their direct connection to the real problem set that is often the subject of those SBIR topics. So definitely encourage the use of CRADAs to supplement SBIR. It doesn't have to be necessarily linear like that, where you have an SBIR and you jump into a CRADA. You could start with a CRADA and use that as a springboard into an SBIR activity, or you could kind of run them in parallel.
Okay, thank you. Our next question. Does the government share data, or is there a cost to acquire it?
So that's another question that I'll take. The agreements themselves will dictate the sharing of information between the company and the laboratory. In certain cases, the laboratory will have access to use data produced from the collaboration in ways that benefit their needs. But generally speaking, the agreement itself will dictate how information flows. And we're not necessarily purchasing data from the federal government. It really is a two-way collaboration where you're providing something of benefit to the laboratory or to the invention team, and you as the company are receiving benefit back to your own needs.
Okay, thank you, Austin. The next question. It sounds to me that perhaps many of the concerning stats that you were sharing around success and failure of R&D efforts relate to not having a well-developed innovation strategy in the first place. What do you think?
I'll start and then I'll let Austin chime in. How about that? That is absolutely 100% true. I think you can trace many of the difficulties and the concerning things that I see in the data, at least, to not having a well-developed innovation strategy. But it's important then to talk about, well, what does that mean, a well-developed innovation strategy? It means, first of all, having an innovation strategy that is, that word we've used several times in this presentation, holistic. It's taking a look at where things go off the rails often is when R&D or innovation is seen as an isolated unit or a silo. That's okay. Oh, those people, they do innovation. I'm not responsible for it. Or they'll never listen to me. It's having a good strategy, but that strategy necessarily has to involve everyone in the company and should be a tremendous feedback loop. I mean, I mentioned earlier, if you have customer sales rep, service reps, or sales representatives, they should be part of this because they are out talking to your customers, or should be every single day, and they will be able to tell you what's working, what's not working. We often see those people not included. people who are having to make the new products. You know, it's one thing to have a great idea. It's another thing to go out, if it's a manufactured product, to go out on the plant floor and say, we're going to make this, and have people say, you can't do it that way because of X, Y, Z. Also, it would be better, cheaper, better for the customer, et cetera. So yes, it goes back to not having a well-defined strategy. It all includes, that means though, having a well-defined strategy means having everybody included, all departments. It means having it put down on paper or digitally and shared with everyone. It means not just people inside the company. It's, have you talked to suppliers? Have you talked to customers? Have you talked to resources, whether it's, you know, consultants in the industry, whether it's colleges, universities, Austin Leach, anybody, have you figured out who are the players, who are the people who have knowledge or technologies that can impact, or services that can impact your market? And have you at least talked to them? Have you at least considered what that might do? So yes, it all goes back to strategy, but strategy is, the basic problem is it can be often, you know, you got a number of companies that don't have a strategy at all. I don't know how that works, but when the ones do have strategy, they aren't including everybody in it. Austin, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure, John. I think your answer is right on point. I would just add that the companies that we work with, often if you're accessing a technology that already has sort of an intended market application where you're not starting from scratch and ideating, innovating from scratch, you sort of bypass the need to develop the complex part of the innovation strategy, right? The getting started part. And you're able to focus your resources in on developing strategy for finishing the development of that particular innovation and how you will bring the product to market. So, you know, large companies or that may access technologies from us may have a certain path to market, and they may have certain capabilities to develop a more in-depth strategy, and a team, you know, product development teams and marketing and a number of other cross-functional support capacities that help develop that holistic strategy. But we often work with much smaller companies that are just getting started. And so when you don't have that full team and that full set of cross-functional support, it's really helpful to tap into existing ideas and existing sort of half-cooked products, if you will, through the process of technology transfer.
Okay, great. We are going to move to our next question, and it is, how can a company know if a technology is worth investing in or if it just looks good based on its patent?
Austin, I'm letting you start on that one.
Okay, sure. Well, there's several factors of a technology which make it worthy of investment, right? And at the top of that list is the ability of that technology to actually generate revenue for your company. If you're looking at a patent, and many of the technologies in our database, you know, they're covered by patents, but we make a concerted effort to really present the business case for that particular patent and describe that in a way that's approachable to companies. So I'd encourage you to go to our website and search for solutions to problems that you may have. But if you're just looking, getting back to the question, looking at the patent itself, you know, there's the claims of the patent will tell you which products would be covered by the patent. So that's often a good place to start. But the actual body of the patent itself contains a lot of useful information that'll go into details on how the technology may be used, and it can spark your curiosity and sort of get your own brainstorming process flowing. So, you know, there's a lot to be deduced just by kind of looking at the content on our website, reading through the patent, and then trying to make the connection between the technology described in the patent and the actual product that would be commercialized.
Okay, thank you, Austin. Let's see what else we have here. Our next question. Okay, it's kind of a long one, so let's see if I can get it out. If a company commercializes a given design or technology as part of the collaboration, how does the IP and patent process work if the end company improves or updates the design and or concept based on customer feedback, design improvements, et cetera?
So I'll take that one as well. And John, if you
Yep.
have anything to add, feel free to jump on. So repeating sections of the question here, if a company commercializes a given design or technology, how does the IP and patent process work if the company sort of improves the technology on their own? So the CRADA, so if you were in a cooperative research and development agreement with a defense or veterans affairs laboratory, that CRADA spells out very specifically what happens when intellectual property is produced, when new inventions are created. The agreement would start by both parties identifying which intellectual property they own, so kind of the current state of the invention. Then you draw a line in the sand. From that point, you start your collaboration. Anything that is invented from the point that the agreement is signed moving forward has special considerations that are dictated by the agreement. Depending on if the inventors come from your company or if the inventors come from the defense laboratory, there are special provisions that handle both of those cases as well as joint inventions. In many of those cases, the company has a first right to an exclusive license or to a license to the technology. And certainly your interests in intellectual property is protected through the agreement itself. Now, if you were in a license agreement, it's a little bit different, whereas the intellectual property you've licensed from the laboratory sort of dictates the state of development up to that point. And then you as the company can generate your own intellectual property to further solidify your IP position around the technology and around that commercialization effort. In that case, absent a cooperative research and development agreement, the company, there would be no special provisions for any IP generated. It would just be owned by the company itself, and it would be your duty as the company to protect that through additional patents as needed.
Okay, we have a lot of good questions still coming in, so I'm going to move right along. And this next one is, some companies consider themselves or some of their divisions to be cash cows. Should there be R&D in every division, even if it's considered a cash cow?
Maybe I'll start and then Austin can chime in on that. I would say absolutely, for a couple of reasons. First of all, Kodak thought that film was a cash cow. And you see, we all know what happened with that. And that's happened in multiple industries. So something that's a cash cow now is not necessarily going to be a cash cow back in the day, 20 years from now. I would say now it might not be a cash cow 5 or 10 years from now. So if you're not thinking about the future and where your customers are going, that's an issue. The other opportunity that we're seeing in industry after industry is to think beyond the product itself. Even if the product is a cash cow, there are so many ways to use data, information, Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, to connect with your customers and to figure and to help them understand how they're using it. In industry after industry, we see new business models emerging where people are able to, by using remote sensors, see how a product is being used and then relay that data back to the customer and help the customer use that product more sensibly. For example, in tires, you see Michelin, you see Goodyear putting sensors in where now people who operate fleets of trucks, the companies who make the tires can say, these tires are wearing better, you might want to change this maintenance practice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all kinds of business opportunities that R&D and innovation can help, even with a product that looks like itself, like you're not going to change it. And what you want to do is go out there and, again, ask your customer, ask everybody in the space. And then also, as I said earlier, look at adjacent industries. Look at an industry that looks like that and what are they doing? Austin, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple additional points. I think cash cows can kind of be like blinders to innovation, right? You think everything's going great and there's no need to conduct additional R&D, but we know it takes a good amount of time for ideas to move through the development process to be manufactured, scaled up, actually introduced as products. In the time that your cash cow is generating sales, if you're not inventing a new product to come behind that, you're going to be in a position where you are scrambling, trying to come up with incremental improvements to your existing product line, which, and I've said this a few times, I don't want it to sound totally negative to do that, because incremental innovation has to be a part of your strategy. But if you're only incrementally innovating your products, at some point, those products will start to become commoditized. Your margins will start to shrink because you can't charge as much for the product itself. And you need something new to come behind that cash cow to be the new cash cow. So a cash calf, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How much access would our company's R&D staff have to inventors at government labs after creating a licensing deal or a CRADA?
So it sort of depends on a case-by-case basis. Many license agreements actually include some dedicated time from the researchers to be sort of a phone a friend support to help get the company started on the commercialization effort. Some labs would require a CRADA be put in place to manage that engagement. In the case of a CRADA, you really have, I don't want to say unlimited, because the researchers certainly are busy in the labs solving problems for the government. That said, when they enter into a CRADA with your company, they've already justified that that's a positive use of their time, and they've gotten approvals from their leadership to enter into that agreement. So they are really there as a resource. And if you form a very strong bond, then it may be a check-in on a weekly basis or every few weeks as needed. So it can vary between those two agreements. Again, licensing usually will include some access to the invention team, but for those real more detailed conversations, especially when inventions are expected or advancements to the technology are expected through those conversations, the CRADA really is the agreement to have in place, and that will give you direct access to the invention team.
Okay, moving right along here. Can you speak to the makeup of the survey respondents? How many, which industry, size of the company? And from analysis of the survey or your experience helping companies partner, are there specific industries that are lagging more than others, or are there any that might benefit most from partnering with government labs?
Well, I'll do the first part about the survey, and then I'm going to let Austin talk about which industries he's seeing benefit most. The survey itself, we went to 152 companies. We went to a number of different industries. Software was the highest represented industry. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Austin. And Austin, what do you see as the industries that benefit most?
Well, it really, for us, depends on the technology itself and whether that technology has a true commercial viability. And that could extend across really the total realm of scientific possibility almost, because DoD is inventing in a number of areas, from new materials to electronics to communications equipment to things that are more military specific. The Veterans Affairs laboratories are inventing very focused in the medical space, and that could be medical devices, diagnostics, durable medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, or therapeutic compositions. So really wide range of medically centric solutions coming from the VA side. We don't tend to see high concentration in one particular industry or the next. I mean, certainly with the VA, more medically focused. With the DoD, it tends to be more of the smaller companies that are partnering with the labs to access technologies. The risk associated with commercializing early phase technologies tends to align more so to startups or to very small businesses that then tend to partner with larger businesses further down the line. Not to say we don't work with large companies, and we certainly do. The interest may, in that case, be more so on the collaboration with the lab to jointly invent new things, as opposed to accessing a developed technology through licensing.
Okay, we're coming to the top of the hour, so I'm going to squeeze out one final question if you are up for it. And the question is this. You made the case that every company or unit should be attempting to maximize the commercializable yield. The lower the percent yield, the lower is their performance. Some companies, however, have high-risk innovation strategies and strive for only a 10% yield, but they shoot for the moon, billion-dollar products. Are companies using those strategies leaving something on the table?
Listen, in the general case, yes, I would say, but I would have to know about a specific company or companies. They may be the unicorn or the unicorn-like company where, yes, that's all you can do. They're using every best practice. They're doing everything possible. My experience on Earth and in working with studying thousands of companies says that's probably, maybe there's a unicorn. I don't know that there actually is. I haven't found one yet. So in any aspect of life, I'm guessing they are, because what we're seeing in this study is that even the innovation leaders, I mean, they're not doing everything, and nobody can do everything, but there is an opportunity to improve for any firm anywhere. And there's just so much new in innovation. And what I mean by that is not the technologies. There's so much new in innovation best practices. There's been so much thought, effort put into this. And this study, in a small way, is going to help contribute to that too, is that, what works and what doesn't work. So yes, do I think that, whoever that mythical company is that has that, are they leaving something on the table? I would almost certainly agree with that.
I second that.
Okay, with that, we are at the top of the hour, so I am going to have to reluctantly close down the Q&A portion of this webinar. That was an excellent presentation. And with that, I'd like to thank our speakers today, Austin Leach and John Brandt. Of course, I'd like to thank our sponsor, TechLink. Most of all, however, I want to thank our kind audience for their attention and their tremendous questions. And on behalf of Industry Week, have a great, productive remainder of your day.